Imagine this. Another apartment hotel brand disappears overnight. Not through bankruptcy, not through liquidation, but through acquisition. This week, Kasa quietly absorbed Mint House, creating the largest apartment hotel operator in the US. And unlike Sonder, unlike Stay Alfred, this story doesn't end in collapse. Today on The Check-In, we're unpacking what this deal actually means for the apartment hotel model, for venture-backed hospitality, and for what survives in the post-Sonder world. Welcome to The Check-In.
Welcome back, everybody. We are coming to you this week with a bit of a breaking news episode, and super glad to have Ben Painter joining us today to unpack this deal. He was with us for the Sonder Marriott Meltdown episode, which was our inaugural episode of The Check-In. So thanks so much for joining us, Ben. Super excited to have you help us.
No, it's a pleasure, and thank you so much for having me back. It's a pleasure to be with you both again.
Yeah, I guess that's a good sign for you. It means you did something right the first time around.
Yeah, exactly. I can only take it as a good thing, so it's perfect.
Awesome. So maybe just for our listeners, before we dive in, I'll kind of unpack exactly what happened with this deal. So Kasa has acquired Mint House. This is an all-equity deal, and we'll go into that in a second, Ben. But what does this actually mean? It means that Mint House investors are essentially rolling into minority stakes. So this also follows a $40 million investment from Silver Lake, SLW, which is a Silver Lake affiliate, which many of you will know from the acquisition space. They've had their hands in all sorts of deals over the last few years. And it also means that some of the Mint House properties that are being brought into this portfolio have the potential to be closed if they don't meet the standards that Kasa has set for their portfolio. So I think first and foremost, I would love to hear from you, Ben, about what about this deal excites you?
I think, first of all, it's amazing to be here, and what I see as a very good news story. I think what excites me about it is that as you probably got the kind of idea from in the previous episode where I joined you with the Sonder, I've always been a massive believer in revenue share models, but I've always felt the revenue share is the underdog, is a bit of an uphill struggle. It's a much more kind of difficult sell. And I think this is a really good market shift. Market confidence boost in the revenue share model. Like we said at the time, I don't believe master lease is built correctly for the turbulent times that we're living in. I believe the only way forward is revenue share. And the fact that this acquisition has been made in a way that is essentially more like scaling up now, not rescuing any companies, scaling up and moving forward, I think is a huge win for the revenue share industry as a whole, and also for Kasa.
It's certainly definitely a real endorsement of the asset-light strategy. I completely agree. What do you think, Ben, is driving the timing of this deal? Why now, do you suspect?
It's a really interesting question. I think realistically, we had a very, very long period of time where the interest rates were extremely low. I'm not exactly sure what they were in the US, but I know that they were very, very low. And I think that the time where that has ended is now, right? And I think because it's getting more expensive to borrow money and mortgages and everything along those lines, people have to be much more cautious and much more aware about who they give their properties to, where they put their general investments. And I think, going back to revenue share model is just the longer term play, the more sensible option. And I think I genuinely believe that the interest rates being higher and it being more expensive to operate in these markets is probably what's driving this now, to be honest, as a factor.
I guess the reading of it is that these two businesses had already two very similar business models, enough to make the all equity deal possible, right? So people wanted to stay in because it felt like the missions were aligned. And with that, you'd assume there could then be a substantial cost saving by combining operations, right? So 100%. combining tech stack, ultimately blending your finance teams, merging in that respect. And it means it could be a real win-win-win for customers as well, because suddenly if you're already an existing user of either Kasa or Mint House, you suddenly have more properties to choose from. So if they're already on your docket as a place you look to go when you're traveling for work or when you need to be in an urban center for leisure reasons, ultimately now it's going to be, you're syndicating both sets of listings, right? By putting them on each other's website. So from a distribution perspective, it should mean gains, but certainly from an operations perspective, it should mean gains as well. Does that feel right to you, Ben?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think that's one of the reasons that we We often see mergers is essentially it's a way of running your company more efficiently, right? In terms of particularly with operations and everything along those lines. So yeah, I definitely feel this here. I also think there's a wider picture here in that this is a sign of the industry maturing. Like this is what you see in almost every kind of newer industry that has come along, of which there are loads in the kind of last, I guess, 15 years, in terms of like social media or anything, along those lines. Ultimately, the bigger players buy up the smaller ones. And I think this is a sign of our own industry maturing and becoming that more professionalized industry as well, to kind of add on to your point.
Let's talk a little bit about Kasa in particular and kind of what makes them unique. We've seen a lot of others with similar, well, somewhat similar business models fail. So what is it about Kasa that has allowed them really to survive and thrive and get to a point where they're actually making new acquisitions?
I believe, going back to it, it's revenue share. I think this is, if you look at Casa now, there are basically, I'm trying to think of any others, but one of the only major urban players in the US right now. What sets them apart is because their revenue share. And I think it comes down to that. I listened to an interview with the CEO of Kasa this morning, and he referred to himself as the underdog. Like, having run these companies before, I totally understand that. Like, you are constantly up against people who can sell much more convincing short-term wins. But it's good on them, frankly. Like that general battle of doing it every day, losing out stuff, but then ultimately wins breadcrumbs every now and again. And I think it's paid off for them. And I think if you drill it down, it's because they went on a different path to what everybody else is doing. And as a result of that, they are one of the last surviving companies at this sort of scale.
Yeah, it's cool, isn't it? It's like it's a little bit tortoise and hare, isn't it? This idea that, like, if you take this building by building approach, you clearly have to do a lot of research and due diligence before you take on a building. And I've stayed in several Sonders around the world as it was, and I've never stayed in a Kasa. I'm hoping by doing this episode, we might get offered to stay in one. So fingers crossed, the three of us could record in there. As a consequence, I think that you're exactly right. If it smacks of WeWork, right? The whole Sonder thing. It's like, let's just throw a building up anywhere and then see if people come. Whereas that way round of doing it is, oh my God, there's a really good building here, and suddenly we're in a pitch against people that are offering a minimum amount of guaranteed revenue to our business model, which is, no, it's more sustainable and steady. So it's definitely tortoise and hare, and clearly shows why the company needs to keep growing, right? Because it needs to drive profitability through increased scale. But I agree. I think it's really, really exciting, because an assumption or something that we used to get thrown around was the only way to do this at scale would be to take on the master lease approach, right? But they're completely proving that that's not the case.
Yeah, definitely. And I think one of the things that, I like to see as well, and it's partly why I'm so excited to come on and share it in this good news story, is that it's so nice to see a company at this scale where it's good news and it's progress and things positive are happening, and it's not, kind of the more doom and gloom that I guess we had in the first episode, right? And I think we close that episode off by essentially implying that this is where investors should be looking now. And I think these sorts of acquisitions kind of show that we were right to say that. Maybe they listened to the podcast, who knows? But we were right to make those predictions. And I think, and I hope that we will see more players in this, and hopefully more in kind of Europe as well, kind of making these plays, and investors actually looking at markets over here and companies over here who are doing these sorts of things, because I think this is the future of this space and this market, to be honest.
One thing to think about is the rise in the midterm stay as well. So we've talked a lot about digital nomadism, the free movement of people across Europe, certainly conducive to that way of living, more culturally normal in the US to go and say, I'm going to go and live here for a while or work here, especially if I have a remote job or a flexible job or a company where there's offices all over the world and I can pop up in them. This to me also feels like a little bit of an endorsement of that part of our industry, which is a growing element of it, because these type of hotels, apartments are perfect for that longer stay as well, or that stay that blurs. So let's say that you might have a week's worth of work to do. That was hard to say, actually. A week's worth of work to do, and then you decide to go and stay on for another couple of weeks with family and turn it into a holiday, or with your partner, and you turn it into an extended work trip, staycation type activity. And I think that we're going to see much more as lives become more flexible. We're going to see much more of that. So having a strong presence there and growing and becoming synonymous with that type of travel should give Kasa a huge edge, I think.
Yeah, definitely. And like I've been saying this for a while, and I think what we will start to see is, at the moment, buildings, if you've got 300 units in a building, most operators will just have that as one thing. And I think what we'll start to see is, in the same way that people diversify their investments, people start diversifying their buildings. So you'll have some on long-term rentals, some on medium-term rentals, some on short-term rentals, some might be co-living, and diversifying like that, and really making use of this new like nomadism, as you phrased it, within their own buildings. And I think companies like Kasa and hopefully some companies from Europe as well can be at the forefront of that movement, because I think that sort of change is going to be coming down the line sooner rather than later.
Amazing. Sarah, did we hit it? Did we hit it all?
I think we hit it all. Yeah, that was going to be my last question, was where's the industry heading on the back of this? And Ben's beat me to it.
Sorry about that.
Well, look, guys, let's not stay on any longer than we need to. I'm sure Sarah's got to eat her lunch now. So thanks for joining us during your lunch break. Gang, if you've enjoyed today's breaking news show, please hit like, share, subscribe in all the usual social places. And we'll see you again next week. Thank you.